Welcome to the Health and Healthcare Forum. I'm Roberta Hall. Our series on health and health care features conversations about diverse health concerns. I enjoy these conversations, and I hope you do too. Comments can be addressed to me at rhall@oregonstate.edu. We're continuing our conversation with Harry MacCormack about an ordinance being developed to restrict the growing of GMO plants on open fields in Benton County. In this section, Harry discusses and reads core parts of the ordinance. At the end of our conversation in part 1, we were talking about cheap oil, and cheap oil led us to talk about energy. And you know, one thing that runs through that is energy, the demand for fossil fuel energy, because that's pesticides and herbicides and all that stuff comes from it, and the need for it in fracking.
Part of what we're well aware of here is that we are past the peak of available fossil fuel at a cheap price. Now, they can say all they want about fracking providing natural gas for the next 100 years. Probably at most, it may be a quarter of that. And it's going to be at a very, very high cost to the environment. Ask anybody that lives in a town that's had fracking, and I've heard interviews on NPR with people in Texas that had to abandon their town because of fracking.
I read the journal High Country News. You see that, and it has had a number of interesting articles on fracking.
Well, it's the same thing with the food system, you know. If we're going to have a sustainable food system, which means it will work when we don't have fossil fuel, then we can't have seed that's genetically modified and owned by somebody. We have to have open pollinated seed that's climate specific usually. We grow our own seed in this climate. It may work in other climates, but our seed that we grow here on the farm here works a lot better for me than stuff I buy that I don't know where it's grown.
Yeah, that reminds me, the book I'm thinking of was by Gary Nabham, Where Our Food Comes From.
Where Our Food Comes From, yeah.
And the story of the Russian scientist Vavilov and his heroic efforts to collect seed specific to various different local areas.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of people working on this for a very long time, but
maybe if we tell the anti-communists that he was put to death by Stalin, that would help.
Well, you know, ironically, when you get into this rights-based thing, it kind of crosses political lines because it doesn't fit in either the Democratic or the Republican Party in this country. It doesn't fit in parties in other countries because everybody is sold out to industrial corporate stuff. So what we're dealing with here, and this is why I wrote the book Kokopelli for President, because Kokopelli is an icon. Kokopelli himself, as a spirit figure for the Hopi, is the carrier of the seed. That's the hump on his back. He's carrying the seed, the heritage seed of the world. And his job in ceremonies is to put pollen on women's heads to make sure they stay fertile, to help with the fertility ceremonies like the bean ceremony early in the spring for the beans and corns and squash and stuff. And his other job is in ceremonies he goes into the crowd and he pulls people out that are considered promiscuous. Well, the most promiscuous people we have on the planet right now are these jerks called Monsanto and Syngenta and Bayer, and these people that think that genetically modifying natural heritage seeds is something that's good for the planet. And that is, I mean, the worst one I've heard is actually for medical use. They've put human genes into a carrot.
Oh my.
And, you know, if that gets out into the world, which it easily could, and we had a gene that was developed here at OSU years ago. Somebody developed a bacteria that could, I think it was a bacteria, that could eat the ryegrass straw. And fortunately, somebody figured out that it could eat other things, because if that thing had been let loose on the world, who knows what would happen. The scenarios are pretty harsh. So, you know, it's human hubris. It's arrogance. It's total arrogance. And it's been that way for who knows how long, but a long, 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 long time. The way that we don't do sustainable forestry in a lot of places, you know, we're better at it than we used to be in some places, but we still could be better, you know.
You mentioned the beet seed controversy, and that...
The genetically modified beet seed is being used for sugar. We had a hearing here with USDA not too long ago. It was held at OSU, and the big companies flew their guys in, all these farmers from Minnesota, Montana, I think there was a guy from Illinois, and they were saying how they had to have seed from this valley because seed grows really good here. We're one of the best seed growing valleys in the world. And, you know, they gave all their testimony, and a few of us said some things against them. But the one that stood out to me was a young doctor woman here in town who stood up and she said what I was thinking. Why are we even dealing with this? Sugar is not food. It is harmful poison. And it's been foisted on the world. It wasn't even part of human diet, you know, except that you ate some stuff that might have sugar in, you know, naturally. But sugar as a commodity has been foisted on the world, and it's causing all kinds of medical problems. They want to talk about health care.
Yeah.
Stop the production of commercial sugar.
Yeah, I wonder about that. And then some of these things that are like aspartame, they're even worse.
They're even worse.
But it comes out of the kind of
Eat
indoctrination
a good carrot.
Or
It has natural sugars in it, you know, if it's grown right.
Fortunately, right now, particularly this season, we have lots of berries
and
other fruits.
There's lots of other fruits around, and
you know, in the old days, I'm talking hundreds of years ago, sugar was helpful as a preservative, but now we've got freezers.
Yes.
So that really isn't so necessary at all for that. Sugar plantation farming came from the Middle East after the Crusades. People who went there learned it, and they brought it back.
And they turned it into a colonial empire building tool.
They sure did, and then tobacco followed.
And tobacco followed.
Which
was a sacred Indian herb from our country.
Using the same technique, so the place for that is no longer in existence.
Yeah, it's basically time that we have to stop this nonsense. We got to get serious about living on this planet, and that's every one of us has to. You know, these plastic chairs that we're sitting in here right now, they could be made with something like a sugar beet. Don't use it for feeding people. Use it to make plastic. If we want to have plastic, that's the best way to make it. We have an outfit right here in town that does that. They've recreated the fork, knife, spoon, plate. We've got a whole bunch of them sitting here in the house. They're all compostable. These chairs would be compostable. We have these technologies available, and we can take the same stuff and do it organically, so we're not screwing everything up, and make products that are usable, hopefully durable for some long period of time. We've gotten used to this throwaway society because we've had cheap oil for 150 years now almost, but cheap oil for 100 years.
I've got another question about beets, because, you know, right now we're getting great beets, and the beetroot and the beet greens are both really tasty. When beets are grown for sugar, is it a different
sort
of
beet?
beet?
It's a different beet.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Just curious.
And what happens is those beets, then that genetic cross gets into our stuff, or we can get into their stuff too.
And you grow the beets that we eat and the greens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's been some cooperation level stuff going on here a little bit in the valley with the sugar beet industry, but basically what they've done now is they've started trying to move the industry into southern Oregon. So a pack of people in southern Oregon are having to defend themselves. They just go where they can get away with it, you know.
Well. Okay, so I've interrupted you long enough, and now we can talk about the piece of legislation.
This county ordinance that we're going to put forth, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you because it's 8 pages long, but what we've done in the context of everything I've said is create the language to support a sustainable food system and to support natural communities, living soils, ecosystems, as well as the health and flourishing of the local economy, of which agriculture plays a role. So there's a bunch of whereases, and the second one is, whereas sustainable food systems are those that do not harm the ability of natural communities and ecosystems to exist, persist, and flourish, that promote biodiversity, resilience, and productivity, and that provide for social, equitable, nutritional, economic, and cultural enhancement of the quality of life in Benton County. And then the third whereas is the practice of saving seeds of a harvested crop, especially heritage seed developed over millennia and bequeathed from one generation to another, is fundamental to biodiversity, resilience, and sustainable food system. GMO contamination or threat of contamination is irreversible and can cause the extinction of seed varieties long held as common property by the people and the farmers and growers that develop them. So those are the two main whereases. There's a whole bunch of whereases, and it worked within this notion of a sustainable food system and heritage seed we set up the rules of how it has to be played. And one of the rules is that corporations can't come in here and ride herd overs. A corporation is defined in it. In the prohibitions and corporate legal privileges part, it says, it shall be unlawful for any person, corporation, or government entity to engage in the planting, growing, cultivating, raising, rearing, or harvesting of genetically engineered life forms or genetically modified organisms within the county of Benton. We have some exemptions for that, but they have to be done indoors in an enclosed space at OSU.
Okay.
Not out here in the open.
That's interesting. That's,
and this is a battle that's been going on since the 70s. Since they first started engineering these things, there were huge concerns. I was no longer a student at Harvard at that time, but there were huge concerns when they first started messing around with genetic modification at Harvard. People wanted to make sure it was enclosed and wasn't going to escape into the community.
Wow. Yeah.
So this isn't anything new, but it's become now with the courts. See, there was a court case in 1980 that the Supreme Court made the decision to allow for the patenting of life.
Oh, yeah.
And so your genes actually within your body, if you do some kinds of medical practices, those genes that might be used in that practice aren't even owned by you because they're used in a process that's patented. So the patenting of life is the whole crucial thing here, and it is the U.S. Supreme Court that did this. And the only way that decision can be overturned is by Congress.
So the idea was, I guess, that whoever it is that develops it put a lot of energy in it, like an artist painted
what they did was they stole Native American seed called corn, and they messed with it and said, this is ours because we messed with it. And they just stole it. It was, Vandana Shiva calls it biopiracy, and that's what it is. And it's affected farm systems and growing systems and food systems all over the world.
And that was developed over, what, 9,000 years or something in that neighborhood. Yeah. But how do they have the gall to claim it as theirs when the history of it is so long and so well documented?
How do we have the gall to claim that a lot of stuff is either intellectual property when you learned it in school, you know, you happen to have a creative brain so you put it together differently. Yeah. You know, and I'm a writer, my stuff's all copyrighted, but, you know,
you use words that have been used for years.
I'm using words and concepts that have been around for thousands and thousands of years, and as far as I'm concerned, they're in the public domain. And I wouldn't, you know, genetic engineering, I don't have any problem with if the stuff is done responsibly in the public domain, but it's not being. It's being done for profit by these huge corporations, and that's the rub.
And that's why they want to own
If it was done in the public domain, then we could isolate it away from places that are trying to grow stuff that don't want to be that way. Well, maybe we could isolate it. Although they found corn pollen that they think has drifted hundreds of miles, so you know, I don't know that we can isolate all of it.
We're speaking with Harry MacCormack at Sunbow Farm. To learn more about the farm and the bean and grain project that Harry refers to, go to his website, www.sunbowfarm.org. The group sponsoring the ordinance that he talks about is the Benton County Community Rights Coalition. One concern, a lot of these are obviously related to health, but one would be that if everybody were growing the same thing and then some substance, organic or some chemical substance came up that knocked it out, then what would we eat?
Which is why Monsanto and Syngenta and all these people have a cave in Norway where they're storing ancient seed.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, this thing is really weird when you start looking at it, you know. It's almost admission that something's going to happen, you know, and it is happening. The yields off the genetically engineered stuff are not what they were said to be. The soil degradation is. I built a house for a friend in Illinois, and the house was on a 26-acre organic. Used to be an old quarry, but the huge trees that had been grown there that was built same time I bought this place. The trees and stuff were planted. So I built a house back there in 2000, and around that area, almost all the corn is genetically modified, or the soybeans are genetically modified. But it was interesting driving down the roads because they have all the markers out on the road, and once you learn the numbers, you can see which plots in those days weren't genetically modified. The energy, I'm a sensitive, the energy fields coming off the genetically modified fields were totally weird.
Oh, dear.
And at night I'd watch the fireflies, and they acted differently around the genetically modified fields. There was at least one farmer suicide while I was there that was a direct result of
what had happened to the fields?
yeah, with what's going on with this whole thing. You know, there's been a lot of suicides in India. Vandana, she would talk about it all the time. But anywhere this stuff's gone in the world, it's caused havoc. It wipes out small farms, farming communities, and it ends up with these huge industrial operations, which sometimes work for a while, but often there's problems that come up. And yeah, it's just not the way humans were meant to survive on this planet. So.
The monoculture aspect in itself is sort of
we have to, if we're going to be farmers, we have to work with biodiversity. That's the way the planet was set up to run, unless you get into desertification, you know, and we have caused a lot of desertification with bad farming practices.
Oh boy, what happened to the Southwest is really pretty tragic, it seems to me. And I get some of that from reading Gary Nabham, because that's his home territory. You talked about the Bean and Grain Project.
Yes.
And we probably should explain a little bit about that.
The Bean and Grain Project was an outgrowth of organization, a three-county organization that I helped put together here called Ten Rivers Food Web. It's Benton County that we live in here, Lynn County, which is the grass seed capital of the world, and Lincoln County on the coast. So it goes from the Cascades to the coast. We formed a partnership with Willamette Farm and Food, which does the same thing in Lane County, which it's based in Eugene, but coast to the
It's a big county.
Yeah, it goes up to the Cascades to the coast. And our idea was to put together a food system that had every element in it. So you have fish and all the things you can have from the coast, seaweed and fish and all that kind of stuff, all the way to grass-fed lands in the Coast Range and over in the Cascades, where you have meat production and stuff on lands that really can't be used for much else, and all the vegetables and fruits and grain. We didn't have organic grains and beans here on the valley floor to put into that system. It was a huge hole. I'd been doing it when I was first on the farm here, and a woman named Chris Peterson, who currently is the chair again of the board for Ten Rivers, not that she really wants to be, but it kind of fell to her. She was one of the creators of it with me, and she's a writer, and she went in the co-op one day, back about 8 years ago I guess it's been now, and she was walking around in the bulk section, and she noticed that none of the grains and beans were from here. So she wrote an article about it. Well, I read the article, and I went in the co-op and bought 16 things, grains and beans, and brought them out here and planted them in small plots and beds. And then I brought her over and showed her, and she wrote an article about that. And I brought Harry Stolford, and his wife came over. I'm not sure it was that year. I think it might have been the next year. Basically, I was just showing that I'd done most of this before. The only thing I couldn't get to grow was sesame. But I found out there is a northern sesame, actually.
But you just took the seeds that the
I just threw right off the shelf and planted them in the ground.
Wow, neat.
So there was black beans. I had, I think I had 5 or 6 kinds of beans and a bunch of different grains. And I took the seed off that and planted out plots that were bigger, like 1/8 acre, I guess, something like that. I never measured any of them, but they were substantially bigger. And we had a farm tour that year when they were bigger, and people could see all this stuff. And 75 people came here, and by that time we were already working at Stolford Farm, and we had 100 acres of beans out in the field out there, and that's a whole story in itself. So we did these 2 farm tours and got people interested, and we also, there's a man involved in the project who's a novelist out of Eugene named Dan Armstrong, and he runs the Bean and Grain Project website. If you go to mudcitypress.com and punch a button, you get you'll get the whole history of the Bean and Grain Project. He's been chronicling
great.
Really great job he's done with pictures, and we've had some filmmakers, and it's been a project that's both influenced and caused conversations all over the world.
I can imagine,
and the success of it here has been that I get to eat bread every day from Nature Bake in Portland. The grain's all grown over at Stolford Seed Farm, was grown down here at A2R, some of it, but right here in the valley, and it's produced at one of our good bakers in Portland. Eventually they'd like to have all the grain grown here in the valley, and that's a goal of theirs, and they've been very supportive in the project. Tom Hunton, who's another grass seed farm down by Junction City, started a mill in Eugene as part of their operation, and he's got some farmers working with him now. So we have these 2 mills, the mill I talked about in Brownsville before, and the one in Junction City. You know, it's a kind of a picture of success, you would say, but it's so minuscule compared to the amount of, we're still only at, I mean, with all the work we've done for 40 years, the research shows that we're probably at most at 5% of local food being consumed here. Most of it's being shipped in from outside.
Oh.
And
you mean in all aspects?
All aspects of the food, yeah.
And the vegetables and fruits as well.
Yeah. And it could all be here. Or, you know, we could probably have 50% of it here easily. Doesn't all have to be here, but we could get 50%. And we have enough land here in the valley that will grow food as well as grass seed. And, you know, to some extent, some of these things probably could be rotated at some point. We have enough land here in the valley that we could take care of Portland and Salem and Corvallis and Eugene, the big cities of Oregon, could get taken care of with the land we have here in the valley.
What about getting some, let's say, fruits from the Hood River area? Would
yeah,
that
that's
bother you?
Part of it. Fruit grows here in the valley too. I mean, when you start looking at the whole thing, and when we put TILF together years ago, what we established was an organization that was both urban and rural, and it was put together to establish a locally based regional food system.
And then that became Oregon TILF.
Well, yeah, there was regional TILF, and now there's 5 501c3 tilts in Washington. There's Oregon TILF here, which is another whole story that we can get into
a different
if you want
story.
to.
No, maybe we'll do that another time. So when you say TILF, how would somebody look that up, for instance, on the web?
Well, if you're looking for the certification thing, right now you can still look at the Oregon TILF certification seal.
Okay, so they do that part, but the TILF that you're talking
the
about...
old regional TILF kind of fragmented is one way to think of it.
No.
It became other things. It became Arable in Montana. It became the Organic Association in Idaho.
Oh, okay.
It became 5 tilts up in Washington, one of them being TILF producers, but there's Seattle TILF, Spokane TILF, I forget, Whidbey Island TILF.
But what all would a TILF organization
All of us
include?
have one thing in mind, that it's an urban-rural coalition, and the basis of it is to provide a locally based regional food system. So even when you look at
so that would be organic
grown,
and sustainable?
Yes, organic and sustainable. Yes.
Okay, got it.
It has to be organically based, because sustainable has become a really loose word that we could go into for hours.
Yeah.
So.
But those other 2 words.
So even when you look at a distribution system like OGC in Eugene or Charlie's in Seattle.
OGC, that's Organic Grocery Co-op, and that's a large wholesaler of organic groceries.
Those are parts of that original vision.
Oh.
So when we look at our farmers that we certify in Mexico, that Oregon TILF certifies in Mexico, you wouldn't think about that as part of our local food system.
No.
But we don't grow tomatoes here in the winter.
No.
The Mexican farmers grow us our tomatoes in the winter, and it comes up here as Del Cabo and a couple other brands, and is available in our alternative stores, like First Alternative Co-op and Market of Choice and some of those places, you know, New Seasons in Portland. So this whole food system that we kind of take for granted now was consciously put together, and it involved trucking. Yeah. But OGC's done some actual figures on this, and the last ones I saw were a few years ago. But instead of the 1,500 to 2,000 mile footprint, which is kind of a normal food, some people say 2,500 mile, their research showed that our regional system, even though we're bringing food in from California and Mexico and Canada, 800. That's a huge footprint difference, and it's all being done with biodiesel, which at this point might be being made with the wrong materials, but it's doable. I mean, we could make it with stuff that is actually sustainable.
You can make it with hemp, I understand.
Well, hemp would be one thing, or if we're going to have the big prairies in the Midwest growing stuff, it doesn't need to be GMO corn for fuel. It could be switchgrass, which is much more efficient at making fuel, and would be a perennial crop. So
lots of
yada
things.
yada. There's lots of things, elements to this here, but it all ties together in a vision, and this ordinance is part of that same vision. That's why I'm working on this.
And the plan is for this to go to Benton County and be certified.
We have to take it into the county powers that be and try to get it on the ballot. And there's a good chance that we might get blocked. So we are working with, all the way along, we're working with people who are used to dealing with these blocks. And
when do you think it could make it?
We're trying to get it on the ballot next May.
Next May.
So we are going to have it out circulating. If all goes well and we don't get blocked, we will be circulating petitions this fall.
Okay, and that would be
we only
within
need I think in our county we only need something like 3,500.
Oh, okay. So that would be 3,500 registered voters.
Yes.
In Benton County.
Yeah. which we should be able to get standing in front of the co-op.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I mean, we've got
yeah.
7,000 members at the co-op, so nobody in the co-op wants to eat genetically modified foods. So.
I think that's true, absolutely. Yeah. And we've got 2 co-ops to draw from.
And most of the population of Benton County is here in Corvallis and Philomath. Mm-hmm. I mean, we do have Monroe, which is a small town, a small pocket of population. We got LC.
And you've reminded me, we are in Sunbow Farm. We are sitting on the back porch of Harry MacCormack and Sherry MacCormack's house at Sunbow Farm, which is, do you think of yourself in Philomath or we're in Corvallis? Kind of in between?
Philomath officially starts right across the road from us in the subdivision over there. We gave that away in land use planning years ago. We said, if you want to build houses, build them on the hillside. That actually used to be a prune orchard.
Oh,
but it is a hillside, so build houses over there and leave the farmland for farming.
So we're in rural Benton County.
We're in rural
near
Benton
Philomath and near Corvallis is where we are, just south. Well, it's been great talking to you, and this is a wonderful topic, and there will be lots more to say. I hope
we can use all the support we can get. We'll be at a point here probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks where we're going to be going to public groups and presenting this and trying to get people to help us do the petitioning and make the push to get this on the ballot.
So what's happening right here in Benton County, we hope may succeed. First off, get on the ballot in May of 2013 and succeed, and then it would be a wonderful thing to model elsewhere.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Harry MacCormack.
You're welcome.
To learn more about Sunbow Farm, go to Harry's website, www.sunbowfarm, sunbowfarm.org. The group that is sponsoring the ordinance he talks about is the Benton County Community Rights Coalition. The Health and Healthcare Forum is produced by Roberta Hall and recorded with the aid of Joe Magner of Anabite Electronics and Recording. Theme music was composed by Laurie Childers and played by Laurie Childers and Kent White.